beyond that, let's go into criminal justice reform. Then, like, you know, I work here on in North Carolina on a hemp farm. You know, I'm getting ready to harvest a crop on Sunday. So
that's so awesome.
I'm totally with that. Healing Green Farms, shameless plug. But I know in our criminal justice system, there's a disproportionate number of individuals who are currently serving time due to cannabis-related charges. So while this green rush is going on, there's a bunch of people who are locked up because of, you know, what I do and I get paid for every day. I know in certain places like California and I believe Washington, there have been pushes to, you know, expunge records. What's your stance on that in the drug?
Yeah, so let's start with the clarification of I would really like to see hemp brought to Arkansas to build our economy, not cannabis. I think that would be up to the voters 100%. If that's why I support the federal decriminalization of cannabis, not the federal legalization. And if we can federally decriminalize, then it should be put on the ballot for every single state on what they want it to be, whether it's recreational, medicinal, or not legal. And then it should be up to the voters first and foremost. Now, if the voters decide to, you know, bring cannabis into our state, that would be amazing because we are the 49th richest state. Colorado is the richest state for 3 years in a row because they brought that industry to their country, you know, their state. A lot of the resistance I hear about it is it raises drug use, you know, teen use and all these different things. But statistically, it lowers crime, it lowers teen use, and it lowers the use of pharmaceutical drugs. So, I mean, there are all sorts of benefits for it. So I do support the federal decriminalization of cannabis, and I also support the nationally expunging of cannabis convictions. We have to make sure we expunge every single cannabis, nonviolent cannabis-related crime all across the entire America. We have the most people incarcerated per capita in America than any other country in the world by far. I think it's like more than the next 10 countries combined. It's really sad. And here in Arkansas, we have the fourth, you know, highest incarcerated rate per capita than any other state. We are poor, we are suffering, and people are disproportionately going to jail and prison for their entire lives because of a plant that someone in California is doing the same exact thing, making a freaking ton of money wearing a suit to do. We actually just authorized $169 million to build a new prison for LaSalle to house 500 people. $169 million to house 500 people when 25% of the children in Arkansas are living in poverty and go to bed with a hungry stomach. We could have just pardoned and expunged 500 cannabis convictions and used that $169 million to feed hungry kids. It's just priorities, man. And a lot of it comes back to our representatives, who they're taking money from and who they really work for, because they don't really work for us. And we really need to fix that. And the only way we're going to fix that is by going out and voting.
I concur. I am with you 100%. You're speaking from my soul. You are my spirit animal right now. So we recognize, you know, education is, you know, basically something that sets people free in regard to getting out of that 25%, you know, poverty metric that you just basically disclosed. Student debt. How do we address? How are you going to address that?
Man, I'll tell you this. If we can afford to inject $6.5 trillion into Wall Street for COVID so that billionaires can make hundreds of billions of dollars, we can afford to inject $1.6 trillion to eliminate student debt for every single American. There's no reason we cannot do that if we want to. Student debt, it's literally a weight on people's shoulders. And these people who it's hurting the most are contributing members to our society. People who are paying their loans off in the minimum amounts, who are paying twice what their loan was because of interest. These are people that deserve a second chance. And I mean, I'm a student. I'm a full-time student. I work full-time. I have 2 jobs. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm running my own independent campaign. It is not easy, and it is stressful dealing with things like, man, these student loans are piling up. What am I going to do? And you have to make a choice. Am I going to drop out of school or not pursue a degree and go get an income to pay my bills? Or Am I going to go to school, incur debt, and still pay my bills? I mean, you still have bills to pay. Personally, I think student loans should not be considered a debt. I think they should be considered an income. It should be money that we are giving to people to help them go to school, to get an education, to better our society. So we have a long ways to come, and we can't afford to bail out working class Americans with student debt. There's no reason that we can't. Look at when we bailed out big banks in 2008, they preyed on Americans, cost millions of Americans their homes, knowing what they were doing was illegal, and we still gave them billions and billions and trillions. I think it was like $16.8 trillion we gave the bank industry to bail them out after they screwed us backwards. I mean, we can afford to do it. We just have to get, I don't know what we have to do, man. We have to get our legislators to listen to us. That's really all we can do.
Well, as far as like, forming, new occupations, a whole new industry in regard to cannabis and whatnot, I feel like that can give you a really strong voting block that can, begin to tip things the other way. So as far as we talked about cannabis reform, but I feel like that connects too to, the Green New Deal. And you talk a little bit about building an infrastructure there in Arkansas. What are some of your thoughts about, that? Like, how do you think Arkansas fits into, climate change, addressing climate change? And do you believe in the Green New Deal?
Well, my opponent is a climate denier. He doesn't believe in climate change. He takes money from the fossil fuel industry, specifically a lot of coal money here in Arkansas. And, him and Trump, they're the reason they talk about clean coal and washing coal before they burn it. I mean, it's crazy stuff. I don't know where these people get these insane ideas. But climate change is an existential threat, and it is the biggest threat of our lifetimes. We just had a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, over 100 degrees in the Arctic Circle. Over 100 degrees in the areas that are supposed to be the coldest places on the planet. We have to make sure that we are not only trying to prevent the climate from changing as quickly as it is, we're at the point where we have to start preparing for what's to come. Because I'm not a scientist. I would most definitely talk to several scientists about their opinions before I ever made some kind of decision. That's what a smart person does. But we have to start preparing for the natural disasters to come, for the big climate catastrophes, for famine, for droughts, for climate refugees coming from other places as our sea levels rise. Something like 90% of the population lives on a coast. I mean, what are we going to do with these people as these coasts disappear? We're going to have to start moving people inwards, and we have to prepare for climate refugees. It's not something that we can just be like, well, by 2040, we're going to do this, or by 2050, we're going to do this. It has to be like, this is what we're going to do today and tomorrow and the next day and every day to come, before we can't do anything about it, before we leave the only planet that's habitable in our solar system unhabitable. And we can see, just what happened in Australia just a few months ago. 1 billion animals died from these crazy unseasonal fires.
Biodiversity.
1 billion animals, man. I mean, that's insane. The koala bears, they could be extinct in the wild. My daughter has seen a koala bear. I want her daughter to know what a koala bear is, or her son. I don't know. Thinking ahead of myself. But the point is, we need to make sure that our future generations can experience the same things that we have been lucky enough to experience in our time. And the only way we're going to do that is by making sure that the fossil fuel industry stops bribing our legislators, stops purchasing our government, and we start looking at how to protect our government. We have to start switching to renewable energies. The technology is there. I'm a big proponent of thorium reactors in our nuclear plants. Thorium burns cleaner, it's more efficient, it's safer, it's more abundant. Everything about thorium is better. And the only reason we don't use thorium in our nuclear reactors is because back in the 70s, the Defense Department found out something very important. They found out that they could weaponize uranium waste. And that's why we have uranium reactors, even though they are less efficient and they are less safe. So we have to take all the money out of it. I mean, it's crazy, man. It's all for war, the military industrial complex. Anyways, we need to make sure that we are using, whenever possible, hydro. We need to be putting, electricity plants in our dams. We have dams all over our state. Are we making the best use of them? We need to look at solar, at wind. We need to use renewable energies. Here in Arkansas, if you have an electric vehicle, they tax you. You pay a yearly tax having an electric vehicle here in Arkansas. In most states, if you have an electric vehicle, they give you a tax refund. So it's the exact opposite here. And we need to make sure that we are promoting clean energy, that we're promoting taking care of our environment. And, that's just the start, though. Like I said, I'm unfortunately, I think we're kind of past the point of no return, and we have to start preparing. We have to reinforce these dams, like what we saw up in Michigan recently, when literally we had 3 dams fail in a storm and had to evacuate tens of thousands of people from a city. We have to be prepared for disasters like this.
I mean, we're late, to the party. We should have been addressing these things years ago, and now we're playing catch up and basically trying to minimize, casualties and people who are going to be displaced, like you said, who are on the coast in regard to climate change and whatnot. So I'm on board with you there. But that leads me into criminal justice reform, because basically a lot of this desperation is going to fuel more contention among the population in regard to access to resources and whatnot, which is why I feel you have people like Tom Cotton promoting fascist authoritarian agendas where they want to crack down on the population to normalize hostility against the American people. So that's why I feel like Black Lives Matter, that the movement to defund, not eliminate. I'm not a fan of eliminating the police, but defunding the police and redistributing and reallocating those resources is so important right now. What are some of your thoughts in regard to criminal justice reform, how we do policing, how we avoid catastrophes, in regard to the interaction between law enforcement and minority communities? Talk to me a little bit.
So defunding the police was a terrible term, a terrible choice of words to use for the kind of reform that we need. Similar to Medicare for All was a terrible name for the kind of healthcare reform that we need. The way we need to defund the police is we need to demilitarize the police. We need to take away their military funding. There is no reason for a station to have grenade launchers and tanks. This isn't a war zone. This is America. We're citizens. They're dealing with their fellow community members. When it comes to reforming our police, some of the things we really have to look into is, number one, when a law enforcement officer is reprimanded and disciplined or fired from their job, they should not be allowed to go to another precinct in another district. That is not the way. We don't want to flick boogers, is what my boss likes to call it. We need to make sure that we're holding police officers accountable, especially when it comes to the death of an unarmed citizen. We have to make sure that when internal investigations come in and the police are investigating their own, that we have a community review panel to go over that investigation and to determine whether or not the situation was handled properly. We have to make sure that police officers are receiving annual de-escalation training. The whole point of a police officer, 2 things: de-escalate a situation and use the minimum force necessary, not rocket science. If you can't do those 2 things, you should not be a law enforcement officer. You should go look for a different job. We have to make sure that every single year, our police officers are going through that de-escalation training, and that we have the type of people in there that are willing to go and listen to what's going on, assess a situation, and not come in guns blazing. On top of that, we have to have higher educational requirements for law enforcement officers. If you can't get an associate's, you probably shouldn't be a police officer. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I managed to get my associate's magna cum laude, and if I can do that, then you can go to school and get a law degree, or not a law degree, but an associate's in criminology or some kind of law enforcement based scenario. We need to make sure our law enforcement officers are trained in sociology, psychology, and they have to, most importantly, understand the law that they're supposed to be upholding. How can you expect someone to uphold the law when they don't even know it? And that is a problem that we are facing all around the country. And, people are going to be like, well, why are we raising their educational requirements? Why would we want to be a law enforcement officer if you're going to make me get a degree? Well, number one, you should make more money. We do have to raise police officer salaries. The average police officer salary in Arkansas is $36,000. It takes a very special person to get up in the morning and kiss their kid goodbye and not know if they're going to be able to come home that night. And if we want the right people doing this position, there are good cops out there, but there are bad cops out there. And if we need the right people doing this, we have to pay them a salary that reflects upon the education that they require, the intelligence that they require, and the risks that they are putting forward in order to keep us safe in our communities.
What are your thoughts about, one really novel idea that I'm really, behind is, having cops nationally require, insurance. So, that would prevent the booger flicking problem you were talking about where, after a certain amount of infractions, you can't be a cop anywhere anymore. Even if you leave Arkansas and go down to Florida where, they're more cop friendly, you still can't, go onto the force because your insurance rates are too high. What are your thoughts about that?
So I'm not a huge fan of forcing insurance upon anyone. Looking at car insurance, I've been driving for, I don't know, like almost 20 years, and I've never been in a car accident, never used my insurance. The one time I wanted to use my insurance, my deductible was higher than it would have cost to fix it. So, I'm not a huge fan of insurance. I think that could be a possible solution to the problem. But rather than, using insurance to be the solution to that problem, we could just make it so that a department is criminally or, is responsible for criminal acts committed by their law enforcement officers. If you make, the department liable, they're probably going to be a lot less likely to hire bad eggs, people who've already had, disciplinary actions against them in several other departments or even one other department. I just have a hard time trying to require anybody to have insurance just because insurance should be optional for everything, in my opinion. Insurance companies make way too much money and don't help us enough. But it definitely needs to be done in some way or another. Like I said, I'm not the smartest man on earth, but there are people who can come up with solutions to a problem like this where we can prevent bad officers from moving to department to department to department.
Fair. It's good. I like you more than I don't. Yeah, I'm totally with you. Let's go campaign finance reform, and tell me a little bit about what your thoughts. Because you talked about corruption, being an extensive problem there in the state. What are your thoughts in regard to how you would tackle that, considering the fact that basically your government is pretty much bought by the wealthy there, and the poor don't have any representation because of that.
Mm-hmm. And it's really apparent here in Arkansas. If you look at the top corporate donor for all 6 of our congressmen, we have 4 House members and 2 senators. Their top donor is all number 1 Walmart, all number 2 Tyson. And because of that, we have such low wages here in Arkansas. We're a right to work state, which means I can go to work tomorrow and my boss can just say, hey, we no longer need you anymore. Have a good day. They don't have to have a reason. It's not like there's nothing I can do about it. I am now jobless and my bills aren't going to wait for me. And that brings me into right to work. We really have to make sure we get rid of all right to work states. We need to recreate federal protection for people trying to form a union. Back in the day, unions were huge in America. And then we went through this whole movement where corporations started purchasing our legislators, and those legislators they purchased were union busters. And they started demonizing unions, was weakening our unions, and to the point where we don't have much union representation anymore. But my point I'm trying to make is it used to be if you worked for a large corporation, you could start a vote to form a union, and it would require 51% of their employees to vote yes. And the people trying to vote and who voted and started the movement had federal protections from retaliation against the corporations. We don't have those protections anymore. If you work at Walmart corporate headquarters, You start whispering like, hey, bro, you ever hear about that union those telecommunications workers have? Boom, dude's gone. Like just disappears one day. So we have to make sure we do have federal protections for workers trying to form unions. I'm not saying unions should be everywhere. We should not all be forced to join unions, but we should have the opportunity and the choice to, if so wanted. When you look at the money, especially that my opponent is taking from people, he's taking tens of millions of dollars from special interests. He took $8.4 million from the Koch brothers back in 2014, $8.4 million. And then he voted on the Tax Cuts and Job Act, which repealed the estate tax for a year when David Koch just happened to die, saving his wife from a $25 billion tax, inheriting $61 billion.
Man, fuck Tom Cotton.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. He's taken money from the telecommunications industry, over $1 million, and then he gave our internet service provider the legal rights to our private internet data so that Cox can monitor our data, store it, and sell it to third-party advertisers. He's taken money from the fossil fuel industry, and he's promoting fracking. He's promoting all of these negative things for our environment and helping cut our environmental regulations and protections. I mean, Scott Pruitt, right?
Yep.
We allowed the fossil fuel industry to slip one of the lawyers into the executive branch, into the executive cabinet. We have a fossil fuel attorney regulating the EPA. Yep. How crazy is that? And it all comes back from money. And some of the things I would like to see done, I think the most important way we're going to take our government back from these special interests, number one, we have to outlaw congressional lobbying. 100%. We should not be using a political position to amass wealth, period. Number two, we need to require elected officials to liquidate their portfolios, and you should not be allowed to own stocks while you're in office. You shouldn't be able to vote on something that is literally going to give you money or take your money away. You should not have a financial incentive in the way you vote.
I agree.
Yeah, and if you don't like it, don't run for office. It's pretty simple stuff to me. But we have to have campaign finance reform. Corporations are not people. We do have to do something about Citizens United. We've got to get it overturned. And if corporations really do want to be people too, then hold them criminally liable for the damages they do to American citizens. If we have a company like Monsanto who's going to create a product that causes cancer and then pay people millions and millions and millions of dollars in lawsuit relief funds, and then they keep that same product on the shelves, I mean, it's just crazy. No one goes to jail for that. And we have to make sure, if corporations want to be people, make sure that we are holding CEOs accountable for the decisions that they make criminally.
But that brings us to taxes and tax reform, and what needs to be done basically to make them pay their fair share. Because those same corporations are talking about, they get all this money, but it doesn't come back. It gets basically shipped offshore, and they're taxed at lower rates than you and I are. What's your solution for taxation?
So one of I keep saying one of the biggest problems because we have so many freaking problems. We have a lot to deal with. But a large problem, of course, is the fact that there's an estimated $21 trillion sitting in overseas offshore accounts that have avoided taxation. We're allowing billionaires to ship their money overseas into foreign banks to sit there and build interest without paying that money back into our society. I pay like 25 or 30% in taxes. I'm an average working class American. You pay the same. Everyone around us pays the same. But when you start looking at the super wealthy, they use legal loopholes to avoid taxation. We've got to close those loopholes. I can't say, and I'm not saying we need to start taxing people who make $1 billion a year 80% or anything crazy like that, which actually, in fact, I think it was like 1952, we were taxing 93%. But make them pay 25%, just like we are. It's way under what they should be paying, but I think it's more than fair rather than them avoiding taxation altogether. And I actually have a whole, as far as corporate taxes, a whole new kind of tax policy idea where I think we should register businesses as either small, medium, large, giant, or corporate. And we can have small businesses and start taxing people on profit, not on taxing people for wanting to work or taxing people for wanting to hire, but tax on profits. So if your business is making between $0 and $1 million a year, give them a 10% flat tax. If your business is making between $1 million and $100 million a year, give them a 15% flat tax. If you're making between $100 million a year and $1 billion a year, a 20% flat tax. And if your corporation is making more than $1 billion a year profit, you should pay a 25% flat tax. Now, at 25%, that's 12% less than what our average corporate tax rate of 37% should be. But the problem is we have corporations that are avoiding these taxes altogether. Look at Amazon, look at Netflix, at UPS, all these big companies that are making billions and hundreds of billions of dollars that are paying $0 in taxes. Amazon paid $0 in taxes last year. Zero. And they took $400 million of our tax dollars in government subsidies. If we could just eliminate legal loopholes and tax at a bracket like this, then we could increase our tax revenue, lower taxes for mom and pop stores that are going out of business that really need this help. And then we can also do something really important. We could require a company to make less than $100 million to qualify for government subsidies. Require them to be only small or medium-sized business to get subsidies. That way we can stop corporations like Amazon from taking hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies, money that could be better spent going to a smaller corporation that may go out of business this year and lay off 1,000 or 10,000 people.
Love it, Dan. I love it. One last question, and then I'm gonna let you go. Right now, you're in court. You're fighting to get on the ballot. You don't have any Democrats, that you're going to be up against. You're pretty much a shoo-in, in my opinion, based off of what's going on in politics today and your political views, and your vision for what Arkansas needs, what the country needs. But next go round, the Democrats are going to have their game together. I hate the two-party system. You hate the two-party system. How do you separate yourself from the Democrats? Tell us what Dan Whitfield is going to do to fight off, this duopoly that we find ourselves held captive by.
So, number one, I'm an independent because I believe that a representative should answer to their constituents and not a political party. That's very important to me. How can you represent your people when you're working for a political corporation? I am not going to hold, I will win in November. I'll replace Tom Cotton this year, and then I will serve my 6-year term. And I'm not going to run a re-election campaign. If I'm doing a good job, my name will be on the ballot and you can vote for me. And if I'm not doing a good job, please vote for the other guy.
Respect.
And I think that that's the way that it should be. We shouldn't allow incumbents to run re-election campaigns because they waste their time working for us, their time they're supposed to be in office, running a campaign, wasting tax dollars, wasting donors' dollars, when they should just be doing their job. And if they're doing a good job, they don't have to go waste that money. Look at my opponent right now, Tom Cotton. He's already spent $3.5 million on this campaign. $3.5 million. You know how much money we've spent? So my website is replacetomcotton.com. And if you go to replacetomcotton.com and you click on the expenses tab, you can see where I've spent every single dollar for my campaign, every penny. And we've spent $17,240.76. And we are known almost throughout the entire state. We're doing really well right now. And we haven't had to spend $3.5 million. You know where all that money's going? He's running ads for his 2024 presidential election bid in key battleground states. He's running ads in Wisconsin and Ohio, promoting Donald Trump, putting his name at the end of the message with him in his military suit. I mean, he's not even campaigning here to his constituents. I'm sorry, I get really frustrated. I'm not a politician.
That's why I say fuck Tom Cotton. He's not supposed to get his blood pressure up like this. We need you, Dan. Don't let Tom Cotton get you before you get in office. I need you.
But yeah. I'm not going to give up. I won't give up on Arkansas as long as Arkansans don't give up on me. We've got this. We have the support. Our campaign is 100% grassroots funded. I don't take money from political parties. political action committees, corporations, billionaires, or any special interests. We are 100% funded by working class Americans, just like you and me. And if you go to replacetomcotton.com, you can check out my website. There's an autobiography I wrote about myself. You can kind of just get to know me from my early life until today. You can check out all my policy stance. I have like 50 plus hours of live stream, videos on there you can watch. I have a really cool one. I like to catfish. I love to fish. And there's a 4-hour live stream on there. Me doing a 4-hour live stream at the lake, catfishing Q&A. It was really cool. So, I mean, go to my website, replacetomcotton.com, check it out. And if you like what you see, and you can, because I know COVID is really hurting us financially, a lot of us, if you can, donate just a few dollars. And, every dollar counts here. And you can see how your money is going to be spent in our campaign on our expenses tab.
That's everything, man. That's everything. Once again, this has been, Brennan Johnson interviewing Dan Whitfield, the replacement for, Tom Cotton. ReplaceTomCotton.com, right, Dan?
Yeah, best website name ever. Simple, to the point, easy to remember.
Best in the world. Best in the world. Thanks for being with us today. Fuck Tom Cotton. I'm with you, Dan Whitfield. I'm with you.
Thank you, Brandon.